Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to New Wave Global. I'm your host, Rabia Mehmood. New Wave is an independent news site which looks at the world through a South Asian lens and also, of course, a Pakistani lens, but also a South Asian lens. And it relies heavily on your feedback and support. Please do subscribe, like, and comment and engage with our work so that we can keep on improving. Having said that, let's start today's show. This show is going to be part of a series which would feature women professionals who have shattered the glass ceiling in their respective fields. These professionals would be from Pakistan, of course, but also from our region and, in fact, from everywhere, actually. So now we are here with our first guest, who is a special guest. I always say that, but today our guest is truly very special. Our first guest is Pakistan's former ambassador to Iran and Norway, Riffat Masood. Welcome, Riffat. Riffat is also Pakistan's first female envoy to Iran, and her postings include the United Kingdom, the United States, Turkey, France, and India. In fact, when she was posted in India, she was first a political officer and then the Deputy High Commission. And while in Paris, she was also Pakistan's deputy permanent delegate to UNESCO. Riffat has also served as a director of SAARC. And she is in the 90s, she was a protocol officer to the Prime Minister. And during this period, she worked closely with two prime ministers, Mohtarama Benazir Bhutto, the late Benazir Bhutto, and also Nawaz Sharif. So, Riffat, again, welcome to the show. It is so good to be speaking to you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start. I went through some of your bio quickly, and you joined Foreign Service in 1984. Not Foreign Service, you joined Civil Service in 1984 as part of the information group. But then by 1987, you joined Foreign Service. Why the shift and why join the Civil Service? I mean, even now, if you see women joining civil service, it's fairly common now, but still it's a big deal. But at that time, it mustn't have been very common, right?
Yes, thank you, Rabia. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you and to engage with you. You're right. Actually, about my joining the civil service, I'll tell you a little background about myself, that I hardly ever lived in Pakistan. I grew up in Kuwait and I studied in the UK. And so I didn't know much about Pakistan, the work here, the opportunities for women. And I didn't know much about the options that are available, occupational options for women. So my father, in fact, encouraged me to join the civil service because having not lived in Pakistan, I wasn't sure that I could go into any other service and give my full to it, because I didn't know much about the country since I had lived abroad. I only saw it when we would come on holidays. And since I wasn't a professional, such as a doctor or engineer or lawyer, so I had to go into either one of the options that were open for us were either the teaching, the academia, or the bureaucracy. And since I wasn't into academia, I think bureaucracy was what was open for me. And I chose the information service because I was quite, I think, naive at that time, or I don't know. As I said, I didn't know much about civil service. And I thought that, journalism and engaging with the writers and literary figures, it might be very exciting, very knowledgeable for me. And I was a literature student, so I had an inkling towards that. But when I joined the information service, I found that, we didn't have that much of an opening in the literary circles. We didn't have, our engagement, journalism in Pakistan is very, very different. It was at that time, it was Ziaul Haq's time. And although Prime Minister was Junejo, but Ziaul Haq was still very much in power. So, the press was also very controlled. And I found after 2 years in the information service, I found that, it wasn't really my cup of tea. I mean, it wasn't what I imagined it to be, where you had free journalism, you had open, writers. Although at that time the WAF movement was picking up because the Hudud ordinances had come out in Majlis Shura. So I mean, there was a bit of agitation that way, but it was a very sort of.
But those were dark years. Those were dark years, right?
They were dark years, but I mean, they were going towards grayness because Junejo, there was a prime minister. So the democratic process had actually, in a way, started, although he was dismissed then later on, and then of course when Zia died and all that. So I decided that I wouldn't join. And then, in fact, when I reappeared and retook the civil services exam, in fact, one of my interviewers, because you have an interview system, to join the service after the written and everything, you have an interview. They, in fact, suggested that I join the Foreign Service because they said that, because of my background, the fact that I had lived abroad most of my time, and the fact that I had command over a couple of languages. So they said, it would be good if you were in the Foreign Service and you feel more comfortable. So I in fact, that's how I came into the Foreign Service. And lo and behold, I managed to, I must say that, again, at that time, the Foreign Service, the civil service was actually coming out. This is now in 1987 I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And 1988, we had Zia died and we had Benazir Bhutto becoming Prime Minister for the first time. So it was a big thing for us women at that time in the bureaucracy and all over Pakistan. I think it was a big moment when Benazir came back from her exile and the elections took place and everybody was very excited that here's a woman who has come into power, albeit that it's because of her father's background and everything, but she was a Bhutto, but still Benazir on her own was, the fact that women in Pakistan were now coming of age, as it were. And so there was a change in the Foreign Service also, because before I joined, my senior colleagues would tell me how stifling the Zia era had been. And a couple of our senior colleagues actually resigned because, restrictions were being put on foreign postings for single women, and restrictions were being put on the kind of attire you should wear, the dupatta on your head and things like that. And, these women who were professional in the ambassadors, and they said, and ambassadorships were also being denied to women. So, they said, what is this? We have come into the competition with our male colleagues. We are as good or if not better than them. So why this happening? So and a few of them resigned, a few struggled on, and they, in fact, did reach the pinnacle of their careers. They became ambassadors and so forth. But after Zia, when Benazir came in, there was a change in the civil service. And I think that helped women like me who were new. We had joined recently. 1988, 87, 88 was a year when things were changing. Of course, after that, not much changed, but that's political history of Pakistan. I think we can discuss that another time. But I think that, in the Foreign Service, we were given that opportunity. All those rules, there weren't any laws, there were just procedures and rules which had been introduced during Zia's time that put aside, and women had as much opportunity in there. So they would go for language training, they would go for higher education through the civil service program, through scholarships given by foreign universities. They would go on postings of their choice, and important postings. So my first posting was London, and considered a very important posting there. So I think that is when the change started. And I think the change since then has been very gradual. I wouldn't say it was very fast-paced, but it was gradual. But it has been sustained because, I ended up in my career as the first, as you said in your intro, the first woman ambassador of Pakistan to Iran. But then at the same time, at headquarters in Islamabad, we had the first woman foreign secretary, who was my batchmate, Tahmina Janjua.
Yes.
So, I mean, we, through our career, through 35 years of our career, our diplomatic career, we have made progress, and we have made it, I wouldn't say, I mean, I shouldn't use the word easier for my junior women colleagues who come after me, because, difficulties and changes and challenges keep happening. But I think that, the initial period where we actually, my predecessors and we faced the difficulties, I think we've overcome them. Now we have different kind of challenges, but I think those ones about be a man versus woman, that has, I think, to a large extent, at least it's changed in the foreign service. I mean, in the civil service overall, because we have women police now, we have women in the district management. So, the change has come about.
Yeah, and it has to be more holistic, right? It can't be just one department or one institution. But okay, so I want to just get to, I was listening to you when you spoke about the languages that you know, and that was one of the reasons why you were advised to join foreign services, right? Can we talk a bit about that? And of course, you've mentioned Tahmina Janjua, who was the first women foreign secretary. Woman foreign secretary, and then your cohort, because like you said, they turned out to be exceptional diplomats, and some of them are your friends as well, right? So so I want to sort of speak a bit about that, and because I mean, glass ceilings still exist, like you're saying, there are challenges or there are glass ceilings, but your cohort and maybe a few others, they paved the way for, like you're saying, not made it easier, but paved the way for more to join. And so that, and also the number of languages you speak, and we speak about that and how it's kind of also helped you, right?
Actually, speaking languages is an essential part of the foreign service. I mean, I think to be a successful diplomat, you have to know at least 2 languages other than your own. English, though.
You're a polyglot.
Yeah, and and it's necessary. The reason why it's necessary is because when you go to a foreign country, or whenever you're in negotiations, or whenever you're talking to foreigners, it's always good to sort of break the ice initially with a few words in their language, and that makes them comfortable, and your negotiations and your conversations are easier. So yeah, I learned French when I was in school. So I didn't go through a specific language training program in the foreign service, which many of my other colleagues did. Neither did Tahmina Janjua also, since we're talking about her. She, in fact, did her master's in French from Pakistan, from the university here, from National Institute of Modern Languages. So, I mean, but, apart from French, I mean, I'm bilingual in Farsi, speak a bit of Turkish, a bit of Arabic, because I grew up in Kuwait. So, I mean, but, of course, over a period of time, when you don't use the language so much, you become a little rusty. But, when you are in conversation with people who do speak that language, you feel that everything starts coming back to you. So, yeah, it's important in the foreign service to know languages. And in fact, it was a point that to post ambassadors in countries where they did speak the language, because it was felt that, if you understand the language of the local people, and then, you can converse and get your viewpoint across in a better way. And so there is a proper language training program in the foreign service. And, they offer all the UN languages, as well as, there's Japanese, and there's one of our foreign secretaries, Asad Majid, he's Japanese, and others. And the present foreign secretary is fluent in Turkish and so forth. So, apart from the UN languages, we have these other languages which we also train in. And women, I feel, it's not only women, but men as well, when they are able to converse in a different language, of course, difficulties do come in, because, when you train in a particular language, you may be fluent in speaking in a conversation, but sometimes, technical issues come up, technical words come up. And so when you are translating, or when you are in negotiations, sometimes you do have a little bit of a, you do resort to English at times, but that's okay because so do the others, So, and then you will find that many diplomats posted in Islamabad, for instance, they understand and speak Urdu. So, this is all part of it. Yeah. Language training is an important and a very crucial aspect of foreign service training. And I think
I mean, I've always known you to be bilingual, so you had a bit of a head start on others.
Yeah.
Compared to others. Yeah, so speaking of your cohort and the glass ceilings, so coming back to that question again, and you, of course, you've spoken about the Zia era and the challenges of that time in terms of also the restriction of women not being appointed diplomats or senior positions, I'm assuming, other senior positions as well, and as well the whole dupatta thing. But in addition to that, you also had a family and children eventually. So you were managing both, and it's never easy in any era. But that would also be something which must have been challenging. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that and so doing both things, and also, is there anything that sort of stands out from your years in foreign service where it was like, okay, this was very difficult? Or, I mean, doesn't have to be a personal thing, but professionally. Okay, that was
yeah,
I was confronted with.
Yeah, I think in the foreign services all over the world, this is a challenge for all, not only women diplomats, but even male diplomats. You see, the foreign service of any country requires displacement. And in not only when we joined the service, but further down, nearer the time, and even presently, in fact, more so today, both women and men are professionals. And so when you are married, your spouse is bound to be a professional. So whether your spouse is a man or a woman, nobody wants to give up their profession just to follow you around. And I noticed that in the foreign services of my European colleagues, for example, and the American colleagues, and all the developed countries, they would say that they had to leave their spouse behind, whether it was a man or a woman. There was always a disjointment in the family. So this is an aspect of the foreign service which is there. And when you join the service, I mean, you have to be ready to face this. I was lucky in the sense that I have a supporting spouse in that way, because in fact, when I was in the information service and I was a little unhappy with the work ethic, so it was actually Masood, my husband, who pushed me that, leave the information. It's not going to take you anywhere, and join the foreign service. I mean, you've stayed out of Pakistan all your life, and you know so much more about the world, and you'd be so. He actually pushed me to the foreign service, and when I said, it's going to mean that I'm going to travel, he says it doesn't matter. And so he was he also retired a few years ago from Qaeda University. He was a professor there. So it meant that we would only, when I was on postings, the girls would be with me, but he would only come on holidays, or he would take us a couple of sabbaticals, maybe once or twice, but not always. But of course, it was a challenge. It was difficult. It was not easy. But, if you have a spouse and if you are mentally ready to live with that, then it is much easier. And of course, now it's become much, much more easy because of all the social media linkages that we have. So, now, I remember when we didn't have mobile phones when I joined the foreign service, but now, we are there on Skype and WhatsApp, and, so it is, families are not as, far away as one would think. But yes, so it is difficult. And I think that for me, when you ask the question about which was the most challenging posting for me, I think, every post has its challenge. For example, I remember, it was very funny, I'll tell you an anecdote, that my first posting was London. I was the third secretary at that time. And it was, I would say, my worst posting. People actually laugh when I say London. They say, London, you didn't like London? I said, yes, I didn't like London.
What year was this?
This was 1991. 1991 to 1995, I was in London. I was there for 4 years. I had wonderful bosses. My high commissioners were very good. I mean, they've, of course, all of them have passed away now, but because I had very small children at that time. My youngest was only 2 years old. And of course, when you're on a posting, you don't have any help as such. So I was doing looking after the kids, doing the housework, as well as managing the embassy. And because I was the third secretary, so I was what you call the donkey of the High Commission. So I was doing protocol, I was doing consular visas and passports, I was doing administration, So there was a lot on my plate. And I was also doing political work because my high commissioners all felt that, I had to also be involved in the consular work and political work. So I didn't actually get to enjoy London. I mean, I never managed to go anywhere, see London, although I knew London because, as I said, I'd studied in the UK. But, to enjoy a posting where, you can on weekends go for drives in the countryside or actually mingle with the local people and get to, relax a bit. There was no relaxation. Weekends I was in the office because there would be some emergency or there'd be somebody arriving from Pakistan and I had to be at the airport. So because I was the student. And then, of course, with the girls, I had to also look after them. So I didn't like my posting in London. But professionally, I would feel that perhaps the most challenging for me is, of course, India and then Iran. India, I was, of course, as you mentioned, I was the number 2. So Shahid Malik, the High Commissioner was busy being the High Commissioner, and I was running the High Commission. I was the number 2, and I was doing all the work. And he was a very good boss, and we got along very well, and we understood each other. But India, because it's enemy country, so to work there. And then my husband was not with me. He would only come and go because obviously he was working here. So I was alone most of the time. And then my daughters were also, one was away, the other was with me, and then she went away. And so that was professionally the most challenging. I learned the most in that posting. I learned the most. And that's why I want to say here, and
What
I say
year?
it in, this is India. India, I was there in what is known as the good years, the 2006 to 2010.
True, that's one of my questions, but go ahead.
Yeah, this was the Musharraf era. This was the time when Musharraf, the composite dialogue was on. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister in India. Musharraf was here. And then, of course, after the elections, we had President Zardari and we had Yusuf Razam Gilani as the Prime Minister and so forth. So we had the good period, but then, of course, that is also the time when Mumbai happened in 2008. So all the goodness that had been built up since 2005 up to 2008, it just went down.
You basically were Deputy High Commissioner by that time, right? When Mumbai happened?
Yes, I was. Yeah. So I can't remember the number of times I was summoned to the External Affairs Ministry and given a rap on my knuckles because, that was, and our relations, I think our relations plummeted to a very, very low at that point. We were at the time when we were about to go to war and things like that. And of course, all this terrorism business. And that showed me, that taught me how fragile our relations are with the neighbor, with India. And I think when I was in India, I was there for 4 years again. It was a long period. Normally diplomats in India did 2 or 3 years and then they've had enough. But I don't know, the High Commissioner. And then, there was because of the situation with Mumbai and everything, they wanted me to stay on and sort of continue try to bring India back on the talking table. But
instead of getting a new person to come in at that time.
Yeah, and sort of learn from scratch and redo everything. But anyway, so but what I learned is that, India, it's a very, very interesting country in the sense that, it's very difficult for Indians, and I'm talking about Indians. I'm not talking about any particular group of Indians. I'm talking about generally about Indians. It's very difficult for them to actually accept Pakistanis. Because you see, they and I would to augment my argument, I would just like to draw your attention to a recent comment made by Prime Minister Modi, in which somebody asked him, that, it was on a TV show. It was a light conversation, but it just shows the mindset that, you went to Pakistan. I mean, Pakistan has the bomb and we should be afraid of Pakistan. And he says, oh, no, I've seen, I know what Pakistan has. I've been there. I went there without a visa. I went to Lahore. I just walked in. I went. So I know. And why would I need a visa? It was my country once, So this comment that it was my country once, this is a strain that is running throughout a majority, I would say. You may find some Indians who are who have moved forward from independence. I don't like to call it partition. I like to call it independence. But the majority of Indians are still living in that past. And I would have so many arguments, discussions, long conversations about how it is important for us to move forward, because independence has happened, 1947 has taken place, you cannot undo it. They would draw my attention to Bangladesh. I said, well, Bangladesh did not come back to India. It became an independent country. East Pakistan broke away from Pakistan, but it did not rejoin India. It did not become part of Bharat. So, it was, and India has to accept that these countries that exist around it are independent countries, and they have their own sovereignty and they have their own identities. And in order for us, and this is when I was in SAARC, this was most of my conversation then, and then further on when I went to India, that, we cannot continue to live in the past. We can learn from the past, but we must move forward. But I'm afraid that it's not happening. I mean, it's not happening.
No, actually, you speaking about SAARC and everything, and I didn't want to disrupt because of your train of thought. I mean, these were all of some of the things that I, of course, wanted you to, focus on. One, I want to get to Iran first, but let's just stick to this part of the conversation. You were also there at the time when the time was great in terms of relationship, right? Because there was a lot of exchange. There was a lot of cultural stuff, sports, and and also in the media, and it was very evident, right? And then you're saying that you were asked to stay back, which of course not to get a new person, but I'm assuming because you had the institutional and regional understanding and you must have been good at your job. So they asked you to stay back and deal with that after Mumbai, right? So what is it? You have pointed this out that it's a problem of sovereignty and the lack of understanding. And I, of course, want to get to the question of neighbors. So, and now you've, through SAARC, dealt with other South Asian countries as well. I'm sticking to your postings and your work experience. What is it that worked basically when things were working with India? Because I mean, as a diplomat, because we need to get along with our neighbors, right? So, or the neighbors have to get along with this mutual. Definitely. What is it like? What's your learning from that time? What is it which was working with Indians until it didn't? I mean, Mumbai is also a very, there was terrorism and whatnot. So, but can you please,
I think it's to do with leadership. And I think it's to do with the need for leadership to have a political vision. A vision for not only their own countries, but a vision for the region as well. And to look beyond themselves as well. Because, you see, I mean, it's now so clear that if anybody doesn't understand it, then they have to be a real dud not to understand that if you do not have peaceful borders and a peaceful region, you can never have peace inside your country. And it's not rocket science to understand this. And I think at that point in 2006, when I was there, and before that, 2005, when Musharraf met Manmohan Singh, I think it was in India, you see, because the reason why I put the onus more on India, because India is a bigger country. And what India does, or what India says, or how India thinks, it affects the countries around it. At that time, we had Manmohan Singh, who was an economist. He was a forward thinker. He was a Sikh. He was not a Hindu. And, you know, all these things matter. I mean, these may be, I mean, but he was Indian, of course, very much Indian, but he had a vision for India. His vision for India was that India has to rise. That's why he signed that nuclear deal with the United States. That's why, you know, he was having conversations with Russia. That's why he was opening up Indian markets to the world. I mean, he had a vision of India rising, and he knew that the only way India can rise is if India has stable and peaceful borders. And of course, Pakistan, with the history that we have and the problems that we have, he realized that that is the country that he had to reach out to first. I mean, okay, they have problems on the Nepalese border. There's problems on the Bangladeshi borders. With Sri Lanka, they have problems as well. But I think the main issue is India-Pakistan, always in South Asia. So he had the vision to reach out. And Musharraf, at that time, I mean, this is my opinion, I may be wrong, was also looking for some kind of political legitimacy for himself, because he was a dictator, he was a military man. And I think the Indians realized that because the military is so dominant and strong in Pakistani politics, that it's best to talk to an army chief, to sort of reach out to him, talk to the military itself. And if they find an army chief who is also willing to listen, because he wanted to establish his own political legitimacy inside the country, I think it just so happened the stars kind of met, and the composite dialogue started. You know, the composite dialogue started, and so there were not only cultural and media, which you have pointed out, but there was very serious talks on Kashmir. And I was part of those talks. And, you know, the opening of the borders, the opening of those points along the line of control, and the travel and the tourism and the trade that was taking place between Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Indian occupied Kashmir, you know, that started, you see. I mean, that was a big thing. Although there were lots of hiccups on that, I mean, we can talk about that for a long time, but I mean, there were problems. But, you know, actually, it did start. And, you know, you would have regular exchanges, you know, chote groups. You know, you had part of the composite dialogue in which, you know, the foreign secretaries and foreign ministers and so forth. But then you had the technical groups also meeting about how to overcome the trade hurdles in Kashmir, you know, so that the Kashmiris could trade. Because, you know, the Musharraf was able to reach out to Manmohan's economic mind, and said, you know, if we are able to bring Kashmiris together, if Kashmiris have a stake in the peace, and if they are able to work together and trade together, and if the families which are divided across the LOC, if they can meet, that can help peace. So, you know, that rung bells in Manmohan's ears as well. He says, you know, that is a good idea. Why not have the Kashmiris talk to each other as well? Why should we just always, India, Pakistan, talk about it, and let the Kashmiris also? So this was a very visionary thing. I mean, and mind you, Vajpayee also had it, and then it was translated further down into Manmohan Singh. So, you know, you had Manmohan Singh saying things like, you know, I had this vision of having breakfast in Delhi, lunch in Lahore, and dinner in Kabul. So, you know, this was his vision of India. But then, of course, you know, then political changes took place in India. You had the BJP coming back, and the rise of the Hindutva and things like that. So things went, after Mumbai, things just sort of wanted to start going. And I think at the moment we have really, it's unfortunate, but I think we have really hit bottom. I wouldn't say rock bottom, because, you know, in diplomacy, nothing is rock bottom. Okay. There is always an opening. There's always an opening. There's always a way forward. But we are at the very bottom of our relations, unfortunately.
I mean, yes, and of course, there is a continuous problem with attacks in India, which I believe are never investigated fully, or I don't know if there's an intention to investigate them. And there is whole regional issue with China and elsewhere. So there is that. But our own sort of contribution to the disruption, or some institutions' contribution to the disruptions, if not the civilian governments. So let's stick to India first. And yes, so not the rock bottom, you're saying it's the bottom, but how can we get out of this sort of this state, because at the moment we don't have our envoys in each other's countries.
No, we don't. And I don't see it happening. Unfortunately, we have now a situation in both countries where, well, in Pakistan, we have a very weak government, I would say. It's a politically very weak government because, we have our own political problems, our own political instability within the country. Domestic problems, and I always say that domestic issues, foreign policy issues are always a reflection of your domestic issues, because if you're not stable at home, then you can never show any kind of stability in your foreign policy debates or policy issues or whatever. And in India, unfortunately, we also, after Congress, we've had this spate of BJP governments led by Modi. And Modi, unfortunately, he has, he is with him around. Maybe in the BJP there are people, because it is basically a extremist right-wing Hindutva party, which is bordering on fascism, which has just no space. I mean, they have no space for anybody other than Hindus. I mean, look what they're doing in their own country with their minorities, with the Muslims and the Christians and so forth. So, that kind of mindset, I feel that it's not going to happen. You need to have a change in that mindset. Something has to happen, or some other country or some other entity has to intervene and say that, look, if you continue with this kind of a logjam, your region, your country, your own development is going to be affected. Now, unfortunately for us, that doesn't seem to be happening, because if you look at India now, India has managed to reach out to the entire world and has shown itself as the rising and democratic India. And the world, because they are, I mean, let's be honest, let's be frank, people are only thinking about money. It's money matters. So because the idea of money is prominent, everybody wants to go into India, invest in India. India is willing to come out. I mean, they are having talks. They are so deeply entrenched in the Gulf and Middle East, which was Pakistan's backyard at one point. But we have given that space away. It's been taken by India. It has moved into Israel. I mean, there are Indian soldiers in the Israeli army at the moment. So, India is now in a different league. They have understood that human rights and culture, these are all very good things to give lectures on, to talk about. But when it comes to real politics, it is money which matters. And then India is also in this position to counter China, because China is the country, as you mentioned, that is the biggest threat, I think, to the United States and to the Western world at the moment, with its rise and with its own initiatives of how China itself is living. And they know that Pakistan and China relations are totally different, and they see India as the buffer to that. So I think, given all this, the fact that we have a leadership in India which is anti-Pakistan, I'll be very frank, Modi just hates us. He just hates Pakistan. He thinks that Pakistan should become part of India. It should never have happened. So that mindset is in him. I'm not saying it's the entire BJP which thinks like that, because I do know people in the BJP, when I was there, I had friends who were in the BJP, and they don't think like that, but Modi does. So, as long as Modi is there, I think we're going to have difficulty in opening up our relationship. Secondly, because the world is listening to India, simply because the world wants China to be under control. And thirdly, because the world is interested in markets, in the Indian money, in the Indian trade, and in the Indian investment. So these factors, I feel that I don't see anything happening in the next few years. until there is a change inside India and simultaneously a change in Pakistan. Because Pakistan also, I feel we have not played our cards well at all. I feel that we have been pandering to others' desires and not seeing what is in our own national interest. And by others' desires, I mean extra-regional powers. And the extra-regional powers, I'm not shy to say, it includes the United States and includes our friends in the Middle East and the Gulf as well.
So,
and
sorry,
we have.
I just wanted to also for you to speak about how we managed to isolate ourselves, diplomatically, or have not succeeded in having the kind of relationship we should have had. So where is our failure?
I think our failure is basically in our political system. We have not had one kind of, we have had political system. We have not had a truly democratic system, to be very honest. I mean, yes, we've had elections, which is very good. And we've had democracy and we've had governments coming into power. But we haven't really been, there's always been interruptions. And so and that has resulted in our own retardation in our growth, in our own growth. And because we have, at the moment, our economic situation, and let's be frank, economics is the name of the game. And because of our own economic problems and our own political instability within Pakistan, I mean, we have provinces which are at each other's throats at the moment, basically. We have not been able to portray to the world that we are a unified entity and that it is safe and easy and good to do business with Pakistan. We have just not been able to project that. Whereas India has, despite its problems, now India has more problems than us, but somehow India has managed to overcome that and internationally been able to show that economic strength, whatever its political instabilities are, whatever its human rights issues are, whatever its issues are with the minorities, India has the money. There are people in India who are willing to do business, and their money is safe in India. Nobody thinks that their money is safe in Pakistan. So these are things that we have not focused on. We have been so busy in self-serving interests of our own that none of our politicians, unfortunately, nor our military, I'll be very frank, the military, because the military has so much power in Pakistan, and even the bureaucracy have not been able to establish a kind of system in Pakistan which is user-friendly, business-friendly, inviting. I mean, even tourists are not willing to come to Pakistan because of the instability. And we have managed to pick fights with everyone. I mean, we have,
yes,
we don't seem to understand that, okay, India is a problem historically, but then why are we also having problems? Afghanistan we have not managed to, despite the fact that, we have always said, Taliban, we have been apologists of Taliban always, but the Taliban have come back to bite us. We have not obviously thought out our strategies, our policies properly. Iran, we have, for no reason, we seem to be shunning Iran, staying away from it, simply because we don't want to anger the Americans or the Saudis. I mean, this doesn't make sense. We have to make sure that at least for us, our borders are stable so that trade and investment and ana jana, tourism, this can take place. And then that will open doors and people will come to Pakistan. People will, then, things will improve. But, we have to have serving interests, unfortunately.
Yeah. Ideally, we should be trading with India, and we should be having good relationships with our other neighbors as well, right? I mean, that would be the ideal situation for us with regards to economy and others. But coming to Iran, you've mentioned Iran. How was it? How did you get appointed to Iran? Of course, you did because you were a senior diplomat, but you were the first female. So how did that come about, and how was it serving there?
Well, I wanted to go because after India, after my 4 years in India, I realized In fact, I realized it long before that, because when I was in Paris also, and when I was in Ankara, in Turkey especially, and in Turkey, that's when 9/11 happened, when I was in Turkey, and I realized how Afghanistan has come into the, and I found out that it actually struck me that the neighborhood is the most important for any country's political, economic, regional survival, to understand your neighbors. And I feel, I definitely feel even today that we do not understand our neighbors properly. We have not tried to understand them, or at least we have, if we do understand them, we sort of look the other way because, we are under pressure from other extra-regional powers. So after Iran, after India, I felt, because I knew a lot about Afghanistan also through SAARC, I felt that it was important for me to also go to Iran and see what exactly is happening in Iran. Because you see, Iran is one of those countries which is closed. The whole world has shunned Iran. So, the only information you get about Iran is through the Western media. And the Iranian media itself is so controlled, and it's like a police state over there. But I said, I want to know, why is it that we, as Pakistanis, we have a cultural, a historical, such a strong cultural and historical linkage with Iran? I mean, Farsi and Urdu are like, almost the same languages. If you speak Urdu and Farsi, you can understand each other. And we are Muslim countries. And I mean, we don't have any issues with India. We have a historical, we were part of India, and then, we became independent. So we have territorial and other issues with India. And Afghanistan is also a problematic country, but Iran, so we don't have any problems with Iran. So why is it that we are not? That's why I wanted to very much go to Iran. There was a feeling in the Foreign Service. I wanted to go back as far back as 2014. I wanted, when openings were taking place, and I asked, they were sending me to Bangladesh, and I said, well, Bangladesh, it's good, but I'd rather go to Iran. Why don't you send me to Iran? And at that time, the leadership, they said, oh, no, women in Iran, it's very obscurantist and blah, 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 and you shouldn't go. And I said, well, what are they going to do to me? I mean, I'm going to be an ambassador of Pakistan. They said, no, you will not be successful in this and that. And I disagreed. So they sent me to Norway, which was fine. Norway was wonderful. I enjoyed my time thoroughly, and the Norwegians are wonderful people. I think it's a great country. It's a great country, great people. But I still wanted to come to Iran. So when Tehmina Janjua was the foreign secretary, and she was, my time in Norway was coming up, and she says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, Iran is opening up again, so just try and see if they give me, And she said, do you think they will? I said, well, let's just try. They said no before. What did they say? They said no again. So no. And then somehow I think it just happened. I think again the stars were on my side. And I got Iran. And although I was only there for about 2 years, because then I retired, Iran is a country which is very different to what we actually think it is about. Yes, it has its political problems. It has its own system of government, which is totally different. It's a theocracy and so forth. But Iran has got much, much more to offer. And I think Pakistan would benefit greatly. And I'm glad that after my time, the sort of, my predecessors started it. I pushed the momentum a little stronger for getting closer relations with Iran. And I'm glad that my successors have actually kept that momentum going, because I think that if we are able to have a stable, successful relationship with Iran, it will really help us, not only politically. Balochistan there'll be stability in Balochistan to a large extent, and it would also help us economically as well. I think because we will have a kind of a vibrant trade going on between the two countries. I mean, it's an energy-rich country. Yeah, but they have so much gas, they have oil, they have, and we are an energy star. That should be the basis of our relationship. If we can get energy from Iran, cheap energy from Iran, what more do we want? But of course, there there are
But we
issues.
have problems on that border as well, and no one can seem to come out of it. And we were talking about India, and good for them, they have a Chabahar, relationship with Iran, and they have
Yeah.
braved to manage to have it. But why do you think we are still fighting even with Iran, or confronting, or being, continuously finding ourselves in positions where we are in confrontation with Iran as well?
Because I said that because we, as I said right at the beginning, we don't have a visionary leadership. We hardly had any visionary leadership. And we are so overwhelmed, and we are, I wouldn't like to use the word control, but we are influenced very strongly by extra regional powers and what they have to say, because obviously we are a country which is heavily in debt. So, we have, those who have our purse strings, they call the shots. And those countries don't have relations with it. The United States is paramount. They do not want us to have the gas pipeline. They have been adamant about it. They are very clear about it. And I think the gas pipeline is the pipeline which will provide cheap and efficient gas to Pakistan, and we will overcome our energy crisis, but the US doesn't want it.
What about the Saudis?
So the Saudis are also there, but the Saudis themselves are mending relations with Iran. You see, now that's why in the beginning of my conversation, when I talked about visionary leadership, you see the leadership in Saudi Arabia is now different. The crown prince now has a different vision for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is also changing. Saudi Arabia is no longer that kind of obscurantist country which it used to be. And he has a vision 2030 for Saudi Arabia, in which he wants Saudi Arabia also to develop economy. And he has realized that if they continue having this stressful relationship along their borders, because they share the waters with Iran, the Arabian Gulf, Persian. If you're in Iran, it's the Persian Gulf. If you're in Saudi Arabia, it's the Arabian Gulf. But because of the fact that there's always been that constant battle with Iran, and so much of energy, so much of funds, so much of effort goes into that, unless they have that security, that stability, they cannot have a vibrant economic relationship. And China plays a very, very important role in all this. China was able to, because China is invested very heavily in Iran. There's a great Chinese investment. And the Chinese have seen that, you talked about Chabahar. Chabahar has a very long way to go. I mean, India has, but India is the only investor there. Nobody else is invested. So Chabahar is the moment it's not picking up. Maybe, I don't know, later on it might, because you see, nobody wants to invest in Iran. You see, a port can only be successful, or any kind of project can be only successful if there's investment going into it and making it grow. India is the only investor in Chabahar. India is also scared in the sense that they don't want to be too close to Iran and jeopardize their relationship with the United States and Saudi Arabia. So they are playing a balancing act. China too is playing. China doesn't care. So China has decided that it's going to have a two-pronged strategy. It's got the CPEC with Pakistan, and it wants to have this other alternate part of the BRI with Iran to open up to the Gulf, and then move on to the Middle East and Africa and so forth. So, and China was able to convince the Arabs, the Gulf, the Saudis and the Qataris and the UAE and all of them that, if you are able to mend your relations with Iran, you can benefit from the Chinese investments. So, these are all people with vision, leaders who have their country and their region's vision in mind. They are successful. They are able to see how the future can unfold. And the Iranians, of course, are desperate. Anybody comes in, they're happy, because nobody is coming into Iran. So Saudi Arabia and Iran are getting better. Their relations are, despite the fact that Gaza has happened and things have gone sour, but the talks are still going on. I mean, they're opening up embassies and so forth. But it's the United States, basically. The United States, because Iran is very close to China, Iran is very close to Russia. We are close to China. We have got good relations with Russia. So the United States is not comfortable with all this. And therefore, they are making it difficult. And they are able to influence us, and we do get influence, unfortunately. That's been our, because we have, the reason why we get influence is because, as I said, we have not had political stability. Unless you have political stability in your country, you cannot have economic stability. This is my
this is my second last question. And the second last question is that when you say we are not politically stable, we have not had military, we have not had the kind of leadership which has vision. There is this belief that Pakistan's foreign policy with key countries is impacted heavily by the Pakistani military. Does this mean the most powerful institution in the country, the military, does not have that vision, and they are the problem?
They are part of the problem.
They're part of the problem.
You see, I mean, they are not the only problem. I wouldn't want to blame the military only. I think the bureaucracy has played a very detrimental role. It's a whole list of self-serving interests. You know, the politicians have played into that. Everybody sees their own interests, and military has also been part of it. So it's not just, you can't just blame one entity. You see, a country is not governed by just one entity. It's a group. There are various stakeholders. There's the business community. And the business community, you know, is so heavily invested in the Western countries, because that's where most of their business is. They are our largest trading partners. So they don't want to have their businesses impacted by having trading with Iran just because it's good for the country. They say, no, forget it. I mean, we would much rather lose trade with Iran than lose trade with, say, the United States or the European Union. So it is one, but you know, the reason all of this can be solved if you have a system which is not governed or becomes subservient to individuals. A system which works, a democratic system which works, in which, you know, the parliament is supreme, and whatever the parliament says, the judiciary is strong. I mean, it's a whole holistic thing. I mean, we're getting into the politics of Pakistan, which is not my forte, but this is, as a diplomat, this is my problem. I mean, I remember that my most difficult time in my postings abroad was to explain a military coup. And we've had plenty of them. And whenever a military coup would happen, and I would sort of think, oh God, what am I going to say?
In the 90s, I'm assuming, and also then Musharraf and all. Where were you?
So it was Musharraf.
At that time.
I was in France.
Okay.
It was terrible. I was in France, and Kargil had happened.
Yeah.
Kargil had happened, and we had paid for and bought Mirage aircraft from France, and they stopped our supply. And we said, how can you do this? And they said, well, why are you doing Kargil? And we said, and we were, of course, lying, because we said, oh, it's not us, it's the Mujahideen, this and that. You know, so, and then Musharraf came into power. I mean, a military coup. And I remember very well, I was the deputy permanent delegate at UNESCO, and we were running for the executive board, for a place on the executive board. And, you know, elections happened, you know, and my ambassador at that time, God rest his soul, Shahryar Khan, he says, we will lose the elections. And Atiya Ayatollah, who was and a UNESCO sort of, you know, she was the matriarch of UNESCO in Pakistan. Forget about it, all your hard work. I said, no, I'm going to keep trying hard. I'm going to keep trying to get Pakistan on the board again. And TK, Sharaf is coming. And it was a lot of hard work, and I had to do a lot of convincing, and I had to canvassing, because how do you sell a military coup to democracies? You know, they say, you know, what is this? Whereas India has never had a military coup. You see, I mean, we are always compared with India, and India is a difficult country for us, but if the rest of the world is a democracy, TK, they have their problems, but it's a system which is stable. There is stability that way in India. Pakistan, there's no stability. Sometimes it's the military, sometimes it's the parliament. Even when it's the parliament, They're not sure. I mean, I've never heard of any countries, prime ministers and presidents going and meeting the army chief. It never happens in other countries. It happens in Pakistan because they know that even if there's a politician and parliament and democracy, the real power lies with the army chief. So, these things, I mean, we have to actually grow out of this. We have to decide, okay, if we're going to have a military setup, okay, that's what's going to be. Forget parliament, forget politicians, forget democracy, then stick to that. I mean, you stick to something so that there is stability in the country. You can't have this back and forth.
Okay. Stick to something. Yeah, even if it's the military leadership. True. Okay. So very interesting insights, comment on like the interest of the business community and also the failures of the bureaucracy itself, having an impact on why we've had disasters in the region. Last question. What is your advice to young women joining foreign service or wanting to join foreign service? What's the scope for brilliant young diplomats and especially young women?
I think, having served not only in the foreign service, but also had a short stint in the information service, and then of course having batchmates and friends who are in other services, in the customs, in the DMG police, and so forth. I feel even today, even now, I feel that the foreign service is the best for women, especially. And the reason why I say that, there are several reasons. Although, yes, it entails displacement of family, it entails, disruption in your family life and so forth. But apart from that, I feel that it is amongst the bureaucracy, it is perhaps one of the cleaner services, in that way. Secondly, it gives you the opportunity, travel, I feel, and not because I've already lived abroad so long, but I feel traveling, and I instill this in my daughters a lot, traveling is the best education. You can have as many degrees as you want. But when you travel and you meet people from different cultures, from different societies, you interact with them closely on a daily basis, you begin to understand different systems, and you try to educate not only yourself, but bring some of that back to your own country and do good for yourself. So it works both ways. You portray your country in a positive way by being a woman, because I think women, there's a global impression that women in Pakistan are the subjugated, suppressed women. Muslim women are suppressed all over the world. So when you go across and you say, I'm from Pakistan and I'm a counselor, or I'm an ambassador, or I'm a second secretary or whatever, they say, oh, so Pakistan has women diplomacy. And you told, yes, and Pakistan has women professionals. So that breaks the ice for a start. And then you are able to show a part of Pakistan which many people unfortunately do not see. So I think for women, it is very easy. It's easier in that way because, they just have to be themselves. They just have to go there and say that here I am, I'm a Pakistani woman. And I speak English, I speak French, I speak Italian, blah, blah, blah. And here I am, and I've got, I'm a modern Pakistani woman. And this is what Pakistan has to offer. So I think for women who want to join the civil service, I think the foreign service is one of the best options for them. And it provides a clean environment in the sense that, there's no, pressures on, visa pressures are there, by politicians and so forth to get, but visas, nobody listens to us anyway. The countries are sovereign, they issue their own visas. But I think apart from that, I think it offers a good opportunity for women to not only educate themselves and their children, their families, but also show a part of Pakistan which many people do miss.
That's an interesting answer. Okay, so I wanted to ask this question. I'm going to place it somewhere because it'll be edited. It's quite long, so we'll edit it. But this one question I really wanted to ask. You mentioned Benazir Bhutto when she was the first prime minister. You were already in the foreign service and the impact it had generally on women who were working in your department. How was it working with her as a protocol officer? And of course with Nawaz Sharif as well, but how was that part of your role? Do you remember anything from it?
I remember a lot.
Yeah.
But it was tough because it was tough. It was tough in the sense that, of course, it was tough with both of them because, of course, the pressures of a prime minister's office are 24/7. And although foreign service itself is a kind of a 24/7 job, because when you're in Islamabad and you're communicating with your missions abroad, there are different time zones and so forth. So long hours we are used to long hours in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But for a prime minister's office, there are different pressures, there are different challenges, and it was tough because it meant that you have no time, absolutely no time. In fact, I felt ill. There was just so much work that I felt ill, and I had to take some rest. But but I admired Benazir. I'm not a People's Party supporter, by the way, but I admired Benazir because I felt that it was very important for the women of Pakistan to have a woman prime minister. And although I disagreed with a lot of what she did, what she stood for, and I feel that she could have done a lot more for women of Pakistan than she did. Maybe she didn't have the time. But then, of course, she also didn't have absolute power. Power was elsewhere. And so she was also constrained in many ways. But I think that despite the constraints, despite the difficulties that she faced, I think having a woman prime minister at that time, especially after Zia and those 11 dark years of Zia-ul-Haq, and the way he sort of destroyed a lot of what's, unfortunately, we're still suffering from what Zia sowed. For a woman to come in and take the realms of power, I think it was very good. In the end, of course, it turned out to be a bit disappointing for us as women because we were probably expecting too much from her and not realizing that, she probably did not have the kind of power that we thought a prime minister should have, because we know the power dynamics of Pakistan. So yeah, it was a great learning experience for me. I enjoyed my period, but it was a very tough with both Benazir and Nawaz Sharif, because of course the prime minister's job is a very tough job.
Thank you so much, Riffat, for speaking to us. This was great. You went down the memory lane, but some of the incidents you have mentioned, the way you highlighted and what you told us about your time in India, Iran, and in fact, having to explain a coup to the French government were also very amusing for us. Thanks to our viewers as well for watching New Wave Global. Please keep watching. And again, please do subscribe, like, and comment and engage with our work so that we can keep improving. Khuda Hafiz.